As an audience member, I was about like 4 or 5 years old, and we're talking about the late 40s. Where I lived in Ipoh, there was a sandiwara. Every Saturday night, the Malay community villages in the outskirts of Ipoh will come to that one particular area next to the riverbank, and then they will sell their goods, and there's a stage there too, just a raised platform, which is obviously covered, and they will have all their little dancers and comedy acts and so forth. I was too young to even reach the stage, so everybody stood. There was no sitting or anything like that, so the stage was a little high. So I'll have to have a older fella hold me up on his shoulders or whatever, and I'll hug the stage, and I was watching the performers like just a few feet away with all those lights. This happened every Saturday, and in those days there wasn't TV, there was not much radio, there was not much anything, obviously. And this is even before I went to school. So my first impressions outside home was actually the weekly Saturday night sandiwara. And so I'd known all the Malay stories and all the hikayats and so forth. Of course, I didn't know what the names were, but it was nice to see flashy costumes and people dying and people chasing and people laughing and so on and so forth. I was 11 years old and I was in a Tamil play, and I didn't have any dialogue. I carried a spear, I was a soldier. I remember that very clearly because you had lots of time to observe and record meanings and so on. You're not thinking of any future, it was just being on stage on the other side of the audience. My father was a stage personality. He was an actor, but I'm sure he would have been very good at it. He was a speaker and he was a motivational person and a great supporter of the Tamil arts and culture and language. So seeing people on stage and making a difference probably was associated in my head at that growing time. And that was at 11. But 4 years later, when I was 15, I had my first dialogue role as a sea captain in Twelfth Night. You get me there. I haven't actually thought about it because they all merge. It's the people outside of me, the directors, the production houses, producers and so on who make the difference. But for the actor, it is the same game, same gimmick, same whatever you have to do, whether it's professional or not. That's why I can't distinguish it. Yes, I have been in Hollywood movies. I have been in so-called professional things. But when did it start? I think that would have been somewhere in the 70s already. And it was just a very small token sum because some avant-garde director at that time says the performers must be paid. So here's $7.85. There were not very many theaters. There was the KL theater, and that was old-fashioned, but it got, there was a fire and they had to re-embellish the whole thing, by which time politics had come on. There was now Dewan Bandaraya and so forth. They were very possessive of who should have it and all that. But by that time, there were other more facilities which had already come about. What comes to my mind is the Malayan Teachers College next to the university at the KL entrance. It used to be, for some time, even University Kebangsaan where it started. So they had what was the MTC Hall, Malayan Teachers College Hall. And that was purpose-built in the 60s. So it had the stage, it had, well, what the 60s technology was like. Which at that time in the 60s was like, whoa, you press a button, the curtain opens. You don't have to have two people running towards each other or running towards. Yeah, I remember those early days. It has evolved. I mean, depending, there's so many aspects to it. You're asking me as a composite whole. In some areas, we have developed a lot. In some areas, I don't think we have moved very far. And some areas, we may have actually been overloaded. There's too much to choose from. I mean, you can have 24-hour entertainment at the press of a handheld device sitting in your own sitting room. That much entertainment is available in all the various languages from all parts of the world. So I feel that traditional theatre has been one of the biggest losers in this. Although in some areas, theatre has grown. Obviously, they are now taught in universities. I couldn't have at one time believed that this would rate to be a university degree, and that people can actually graduate, not in this country, but in other countries, with a theatre degree and get a good job and see a future. Obviously, they must have seen some future in order to spend 3-4 years getting an undergraduate degree, which will take them some distance. The prep is discipline. And I don't think sheer talent or relationships among key personnel in the production will take you that far. But you've got to have the discipline to put the lines in. If not, you cannot be an actor, as simple as that. Take directions, go through a creative transitor or something like that within you, somewhere inside you, and then take that information, and then output is creativity. I carried this spear in 1961. 62, I was Morocco, the Merchant of Venice. 63, I was Macbeth, and I was 17 years old. Opposite me was a 33-year-old Norwegian professional actress.
Lady Macbeth, I presume?
Lady Mac. And that was in 1963.
How did you prepare for that role, that Scottish
You see,
play?
there was this innocence, where obviously the teacher, who's also the director of the play, and had this faith in me and said, you can do it. But not knowing what the enormity of it is, not knowing that there were so many lines, and not being an actor, I was just lower six student, more interested in sports and chasing girls. So the theatre thing is like, if the teacher say I can do, I do now. But having done Morocco, which was a speaking role and so on, and having strong support from my parents, like, if this is what you want, do it, but do it well. So those were factors which must have helped me, because obviously I didn't forget lines. And I was, probably Lady Macbeth had a lot to do with it also. She set standards. She came in with the lines intact. Obviously, she had only 2 speeches. So Macbeth at age 17 was my first task. I did that. I've actually been asked that before, and I couldn't get an answer, and I don't know if there is any particular method. If you were to say, what qualities do you need to get the final effect, which is you become somebody else for the time you're on stage. You're not pretending, you're not putting on a show, you're not putting on a mask and taking off that way. Theatre is a process where you become. However hard or however strenuous or whatever sacrifices that you may have to make. What I picked up may also be written, I'm sure it will have been covered in somewhere else as well, not just from one's own experience. But this is what my experience brought for me. I think I mentioned discipline as one, and it became the most important. If you're told a certain time, you turn up at that certain time. If you're told that you're going to be off book at that time, you're off book at that time, unless you've got a damn good reason for not. Discipline is one. And also, you set your own standards. I'm going to deviate for a little while. I represented my school in sports. Sports was more important than theatre at that time. Those were the important years of your teenage years, your adolescence, and then you're getting into manhood. And by which time you'd have finished your school, secondary school, you've gone into college or university, and I became a teacher, a sixth form teacher at age 22. And I was a teacher for about 5 years. During that entire period, there was one thing which I noticed looking backwards, which was consistent besides my family. The consistent thing was as an actor. And the roles were getting bigger, the roles were getting more demanding, in the sense that it was not just one production a year. I was now into it sometimes, frequently I found myself doing 4 productions a year, which comes to 3 months once. And different directors, different genre, different everything. So you learned flexibility. You learned humility. No, I cannot. No, I can. Are things which are not necessary. It actually sort of trips you. You just say, I cuba lah. I'll try. And you mean that, not just to influence or impress somebody. And you try like hell. And there were times, I'll tell you the thing which this approach, where that humility, the discipline, and knowing at the end it is for somebody else, not for you. Actually, Bosco de Cruz, the late Bosco de Cruz, and people who have met him will never be able to forget him, because that man was a master in everything. He was a director, he was everything. He was a one man at a time in the, we're talking now 60s, right? Okay. 60s, 70s, until he passed on. And he had this photographic memory, so that, he'll know his lines by the time the first week was up. And he'll put to shame all the other people. And he was a very nice man, but when it comes to rehearsals, you don't tangle with him, you do not offend him. If he's a director or a fellow actor. I've been both with him. He's directed me, we have acted together. And when you act together, you see quite something else. He's a very funny, amusing, easygoing man. But how come he becomes this monster as as a director? And that underlines this same point, which I learned from him: discipline. You have to make your sacrifices. People like Bosco, people like Leslie Dawson, whom I learned quite a lot from, these 2 guys. And some of the names just slipped past me, but who were there, who helped me through. And they all contribute the same, but 1 or 2 original qualities which only they can, because they're whatever. It's a human quality. So these are some of the people I've admired. I continue to admire everyone I work with, because I know we are all at some stage in that process, and you can't say you know more or you know less. What you can say is, if I help that person, the person will also help me. And this is a small little community, a small family, a fraternity with the same identical object. On this day, at this time, at this place, this will happen. And we share that dream. And that's enough to motivate. I can't let my friend down. I think the last one, let's start with the audience. I think the audience is a lot more sophisticated now, And those who come to a play are not coming because they got a free ticket, or they are impressing someone by being there. There is a larger market out there. This phenomenon which all actors or producers will love to have sold out, is actually true, no matter what size that hall is, which goes to show that despite the ticket prices compared to a movie ticket price or stay at home and watch TV price, which is just the electricity price, People don't care about that, but they know the difference when you see something live. And when you can see and do that, then you have turned a big corner, which goes back to my initial feelings of Sandiwara when I was 5 years old. They were there to see, to witness, to get to see the sweat coming out, to see a part of whatever adornment fall onto the floor, and everybody giggles, and you can see everybody's not wanting to step there, the eyes go down. That's all part of that experience. And that is something which you will have, which makes the difference. There are several come to my mind. Most memorable would have been my first Macbeth, that 2 days before the opening night, the fight with Macduff with swords, I had a cut which went right forehead, didn't touch my eye, but split my hair. I had to have it sewn up, plaster, heavy makeup on it. So it's that at that age, a thing like that where your parents are fussing about, and I told you not to, and you know those sort of things. But I think I grew up a lot. I can say, quote unquote, I spilt my blood on it. And yes, I could have lost vision on one eye. So that is one thing which is memorable, that the physicality or happening, planned or otherwise, as part of a performance, strikes you for the rest of your life, or what could have been the rest of your life. I think it's heading to the right place. There are, as I said, more audiences, more groups, more attempts, and there are people like Nell Ng who have, from an aspiring little starlet to becoming producer, director, owner of theatre company, and then gets all her friends to come in for interview at the right time. We got more people like that, dedicated people. There were people like that before, but fewer. Now, there seems to be a natural progression in terms of the tribe is getting bigger. And hopefully this augurs well. I won't give any advice from my experience. My experience is mine. And I cannot come out sounding, I know more than you. I would ask him or her, why? And try to get an understanding whether it is just a passing fancy. Tomorrow you want to be an aeronautical engineer, wants to go to space or something like that. It could be. So it's one of the many things a young person will want to consider. So that's one type. I'll ask the person why you want to do it, and if you get an opportunity, try it. You may or may not like it. You may go far or you may go back. So let you make the decision when the opportunity comes. But if I were to talk to a fellow actor, a younger actor, let's say in his 20s, he's already got a career, he's got an income, but he's interested in this and he knows that this will not take him far. He will not be rich, unless you're Nell. You won't be rich doing this theatre thing. But you'll be rich in other ways. And to that person who knows that and wants to know how to do it, I'll say, try everything, and you will know what you would want and what you would want to avoid the next time. And what you would want is something which made a sense to you, has a value for you, and that is going to be there with you throughout your life, and you can't run away from it. Do you see yourself, after you've got your own family and you're closer to retirement, do you see yourself still doing it? Or do you see yourself after you leave school or leave college, would you be still doing it? And if the answer is like, maybe, if it is still interesting, depend on. That's as honest a person can say. If the person says yes, it is a wish. a dream. But if a person says, I don't know, that's why I'm asking you, then I will tell him, look at all the things you have done and the people you have worked with. Are there positives? There must be some negatives. Balance it up. Common sense will tell you, you go to the positives if they outnumber the negatives. The time you spent, the mistakes you made, the scoldings you received, the relationships which failed, you know, all those things which are part of the whole thing lah. It's a whole sack full. You can't just, you got to open the sack and take out all the various bits to create your own role, your own niche into the production process. And Anna and the King give me that thing. You're just a very small little flea at the back of a huge rhinoceros. Actually, one of the reasons why I've been in theatre long enough is not because I planned, but because there always been offers, and sometimes it's hard to choose. Sometimes there are no offers. Sometimes the offer you're waiting for doesn't come, but you get a silly little role instead of the other one which you really wanted. Yes, all those happened. But if I don't decide, then I would be just a slot for a character in someone's production. And I think 56 years in theatre, I haven't counted the number of productions, but I've probably gone through, if you know theatre, all the various types of genres. And I spent 2 years, 1.5 years in the US, more recently, where I received an award to go and spend and do theatre anywhere I want. It was one of the best things which I could get. So I spent time in San Diego, the theatre department there. I was supposed to be in UCLA. I visited UCLA, but originally that's my connection. Then the West Coast in California. But for real theatre, you had to go to Chicago. But one thing which was common there was I go to see theatre in all these various places, different types of theatre, and not all of them are big deal, you know. And I said that we are not far behind. In fact, we are not behind at all. And when I tell them that these are some of the roles I've played, they open their mouth and gape. And I said, I don't know competition. They don't have any other actor to do this, so they ask me lah. So, but basically what I'm saying is that after all said and done, being on stage, behind stage, in the wings, the only thing which I haven't done really is to write a play. And I don't know whether I have the talent for it, or whether it'll go in the direction that I want, or whether I'll even live long enough to see it being enacted. So, but I've given it my best shot in all other capacities. I don't think in terms of that. I don't. And I know I'm not being insensitive. And I know people, including people who matter a lot to me, my parents especially, my own family especially, who are very proud of me. And that brings a lot of emotion in me. And that is enough value for me.